Welcome to Albums Uncovered. I'm Aaron Kahn, and today we'll be talking about Savatage 1991 classic album, Streets, a rock opera. It's turning 30 this month. Streets was released in October 1991. Following 1989's Gutter Ballet, Streets was yet another well-received album from Savatage. To this day, many see the album as one of the band's best. Looking closely into the album, it's easy to see and hear what led to the band eventually evolving into what would become the Trans-Siberian Orchestra. Yes, you heard that correctly. TSO is basically Savatage, or more so a spin-off band. I'm sure many of my listeners here have heard of TSO, but not so much about Savatage. Or maybe some of you have heard of the name Savatage, but don't know anything else. So this can serve as your introduction. Savatage were formed around 1979 in Florida by brothers John and Chris Oliva. Now, they originally went under the name Avatar. However, in 1982, it was discovered that there was another band called Avatar. With that, the band's name would need to be changed. Taken from an interview in 2007, John Oliva explains how the new name came to be.
Yeah, it was a band in England called Avatar at that time, and I remember that night as if it happened yesterday. I mean, it was like we got the phone call from the guy from Par Records, Dan Johnson, and he goes, "We have a problem." Like, what? Because you got to change the name of the band. So we were like, oh shit. So we're sitting there at my kitchen table, me and my wife and my brother Chris and his wife, and we had big poster paper and we had Avatar written out. And we were like, what can we do? What can we do? So we put an S in front of it, and it was Savatar. And I was like, that sounds like a really bad dinosaur name. So now, and we were just messing around. And I think it was my brother Chris that came up with the Taj, T-A-G-E. He said, take the R and let's make it T-A-G-E, and it was, and then it was Avatage, and then we just put the S back in front of it, and it was Savatage, and we were like, this is perfect, and that was how that was it. It was just trying to figure out what to call the record in an hour. We had like an hour, you know.
The original lineup of Savatage consisted of singer John Oliva, his brother guitarist Chris Oliva, bassist Keith Collins, and drummer Steve Walkholtz. From 1983 to 1985, the band would release their first two albums, Sirens and Power of the Night. Now, Sirens was released on an independent label called Par Records, while Power of the Night was their first on Atlantic Records. Now, these first two albums were very much rooted in heavy metal. They were strictly a heavy metal band, maybe a hint of progressive rock here or there, but more so along the lines of heavy metal and maybe even power metal to some extent. After the release of Power of the Night, the band dismissed bassist Keith Collins. Now, according to John Oliva, as to why Keith Collins was let go of, Keith Collins really wasn't that much of a bass player. He was more of a guitar player, and he joined the band knowing that he wouldn't be there for too long, although he ended up staying there for a good number of years. With that, he was out of the band. By 1986, the band had hired bassist Johnny Lee Middleton, who remains the band's bassist to this very day. However, the first album with Middleton, 1986's Fight for the Rock, was a nightmare for the band to record and promote. Now, during this period of time, the band were victims of poor management. Now, I know this is the same story with every band, but just to put it in a nutshell, Savatage did not have the best management at that time, and at the same time, John Oliva was writing songs meant for other artists, such as John Waite and John Norum. So the songs that he was writing were these very AOR kind of songs, and it came to the point where they had no choice but to record those songs meant for the other artists. So they went ahead, recorded those songs, and it's an album that's still considered by many to be Savatage's weakest. After the release of Fight for the Rock, the band met with producer and songwriter Paul O'Neill. Taken again from the 2007 interview, John Oliva talks about meeting O'Neill.
He saved the day. After the Fight for the Rock nightmare ended, and we were going to break up, and we had gotten rid of our managers and had no money left, I got a phone call one night at like 4 o'clock in the morning from Paul O'Neill and my brother Chris. He had gotten my brother on the phone, and then they got me on the phone. And we told him, we said, well, you know, we're $60,000 in debt. We have no money. We can't pay our rent. We can't do anything. We're just going to break up. And he was like, no, you're not. He says, how much money you need? Okay, here. He gave me and my brother a huge chunk of money, pay all our bills. Said, I want you guys to go into this got us a beautiful place to rehearse. This is a guy, I've never met him before now, Guess it's this beautiful place to rehearse. Says, I'll go in there and write a Sabotage album. And that's what we did. And then he started working with us.
With that, O'Neill became the band's producer. The band's first album with O'Neill at the helm was 1987's Hall of the Mountain King, which was the band's first all-around successful album. Now, for Hall of the Mountain King, the band's sound drifted more into a progressive metal sound, given O'Neill's background in theater. The follow-up, 1989's Gutter Ballet, saw the band experimenting with a more symphonic sound. At the suggestion of O'Neill, some songs featured orchestras accompanying the band. Gutter Ballet was another well-received album, and there were videos to promote it, such as the title track and When the Crowds Have Gone. For the album's tour, the band added second guitarist Chris Caffery. However, Caffery left the band after the tour ended. Now, the reason why I mentioned Chris Caffery is because this just goes to show how complex the music was getting, which explains why some of the pieces are so complex on Streets. And this isn't the last that we'll see of Chris Caffery, so more on him towards the end of the show. Going into the 1990s, the band were faced with coming up with their sixth studio album. Once again, it was Paul O'Neill who came to the band, telling them this time that they should make a rock opera. Taken again from the 2007 interview, John Oliva remembers that time.
It was, it was Paul O'Neill's idea to do the story. He actually, when we were thinking about what to do, because now you got to figure, we just had Mountain King and Gutter Ballet. So now I'm really freaking out, because I'm like, there's no fucking way we're going to be able to write a record that's better than Gutter and Mountain King. And Paul agreed with me for once. And he goes, we got to do something different. And he goes, I got this idea. He goes, since I've known you now for like 4 or 5 years, he goes, you remind me of this character. I'm like, what character? When you tell me I look like fucking Bugs Bunny or something? Or he goes, no. He goes, in this story I've been working on this rock opera story. He had no music, but he had the whole story basically. And I started reading it. I'm going like, this is me. He's talking about me here. And he was like, that's kind of spooky, right? He says, I wrote this. I didn't even know who you were. But if you read the original outline of Streets, it's like me looking at my own diary, going like, yeah, I did that night. Yeah, I did that night. Yeah, I was drinking wine underneath them flashing signs with those guys that night, and it just became very personal. I was like, and then we started talking about it, and it was exciting to try to do something like that.
The story of Streets was written by Paul O'Neill in 1979, originally meant for Broadway. While John Oliva claims O'Neill came to them with the story, another source claims that Chris Oliva found the story in a drawer in O'Neill's home. Whatever the case is, the band decided to make an album. So, since we're talking about a concept album here, I'm going to go back to my classification of what kind of concept album this is. Now, the 3 kinds of concept albums, in my opinion, are the themed album, the narrative album, and the loose narrative. Streets, I would say, is a narrative album or a rock opera. I mean, it's in the album's title, but not a whole lot happens in the story compared to other rock operas such as Tommy or Operation Mindcrime. So I think in parts there is a bit of a loose narrative and you are left to fill in the blanks for some parts, but I would say that overall it is a narrative rock opera. There is a story in the CD booklet that tells the story of the album, which I will be referring to throughout the episode. And given that this is a concept album, I will be taking you, the listener, through the story that is Streets. Now, as for a plot, Streets is an album about D.T. Jesus, or Downtown Jesus, a former rock musician who now lives in the streets of New York City. Through a series of events, D.T. sets to make a comeback while dealing with the harsh conditions of the city streets. Now, before we go into the album here, I'd like to cite a few sources and say a few other things. Now, while I did look at Genius.com, I have to admit that there were not a lot of notes on this particular album. Given how Genius is a fairly new website and Sabotage are a fairly unknown band, that doesn't make for a good combination there. So I looked more at Song Meanings, which is another site that I've used over the years, and that helped out. There was one person who interpreted every song from the album, so that was helpful to some extent. And just looking at the lyrics there was also helpful. There's also the aforementioned interview with John Oliva from 2007, which is from Metal Express Radio. And I will also be looking at the story in the CD booklet. Now, one more thing to note before we get into the album is the way that this album is divided. Now, with this album being released in the 1990s, Streets is an album that was released when vinyl was on its way out. Now, while some would argue that it never went out of style, This was a time when people were mostly buying CDs and cassettes. Now, usually I go through these albums side by side and track by track, which I will do. However, the album's 2 vinyl releases aren't of any help. The original vinyl from 1991 excludes 2 songs, St. Patrick's and If I Go Away. The 2014 reissue on LP isn't any help either. Now, while every song is on the album, it's spread across 4 sides on 2 records. However, the cassette has every song on the album, and it divides the 16 songs into 2 equal different parts, referred to as Act 1 and Act 2, which is how I will be referring to each side as. So with that all out of the way, let's get into this album. Now we go into Act 1, and we start off with the title track. The album's opening track sets the scene, a dark and menacing tale about the unforgiving streets in the city. As a whole, the song seems to acknowledge how children are oblivious to the dangers of the city. Now, typically when growing up, children only know the basics in life, such as their parents, their home, where school is, that sort of thing. For children in the city, it's a place where, to quote the song, gardens bloom and grow, where the sun shines and light is kind. The singer in the song tells the listener about being a runner and a sinner. He's lived here for years and knows the truth behind the city and its streets, expressing he'd like to go back to that imaginary land that innocent children see the city as. The streets, in reality, have glitter in the dark and red eyes sunken and stark. Musically, it's a heavy tune, setting the feel for the album. It's going to be a bumpy and unforgiving ride. Great guitar work from Chris Oliva, while John Oliva's vocals are simply chilling. Not a whole lot to do with the plot for the story, but it is a good introduction to the album nevertheless. Then we go into Jesus Saves. After a little bit of narration from a homeless man, we are introduced to our main character, DT Jesus. The song is really a story in itself, as it gives us an overview of DT's life up to this point in time, telling of his rise and fall. According to the story in the liner notes and the song itself, DT got his start in New York as a drug dealer. Saving up his money, he bought himself a guitar, started playing bars, becoming an overnight sensation. By the next verse, we are told that DT starts to change after seeing, quote, his t-shirts everywhere, seeming to suggest DT's distaste for merchandising and selling out. Or it could suggest that the rock and roll lifestyle just took its toll on him. Either way, he starts missing shows, leading to tensions within his band. With that, he leaves the band and disappears back on the streets. So, in a nutshell, we're given the backstory to DT Jesus, who's a former rock star who rose to fame and then fell into the streets of New York. Musically and production-wise, the song feels just a bit Broadway-esque, if that's a thing, yet it still sounds like a hard rock track. It's not too much of a metal song, per se, but there are parts of it that are metal, but there is some experimentation here, with Savatage taking a more theatrical turn in their music, given that this is a rock opera. For one thing, the keyboard really stands out on this song, and the band sounds really tight, especially during the instrumental break after the second verse. So yeah, overall, I think Jesus Saves is a great song. Then we go into Tonight He Grins Again. The album brings things down a bit with this song about drug addiction and loneliness. The song sees DT now on the streets, all by himself, being his only friend. In the song, DT sings about playing the clown, using his friends and letting them down. Perhaps this is his doing, or could it be because of the drugs? However, DT isn't entirely alone. He does have a friend, which is a monkey on his back. Now, this isn't literal. The term monkey on my back is used to describe one's addiction to drugs or refer to something that's a burden. So, in saying that the monkey is his only friend, he's really saying that the drugs are his only friend. Musically, the song paints a very bleak and frightening picture of street life. Lyrically, it's heartbreaking in that DT is just so lonely. The lyrics are even grim. Take this verse, for example. It's cold, this pain. It's burning in my veins. I walk away, a shadow of Dorian Gray. The line of the pain and burning in my veins, referring to heroin or morphine. Very grim song, but very realistic. I think it's a good song. Then we go into Strange Reality. Coming off of the moodiness of the previous track, we are now taken to a more optimistic song about realization. In the story, DT is walking the streets one night and sees a guitarist that he used to look up to. However, this guitarist has passed his prime and is dressed in rags, given the lyrics of, "Who's this before me, dressed in rags, soaked in gin?" DT starts to wonder, Could this be a sign or a warning? Given the way DT's life has been after leaving the music business, he starts to realize that this hero of his could be him one day. DT has gone about his life every day the same way. Another day, another night, another drink, another fight. If he continues this way of life, he'll end up like his hero. With this glimpse into the future, DT wonders if he should change his ways. As mentioned before, it's a pretty upbeat song, which would probably come from the fact that DT is having this wake-up call. Could he possibly make a comeback? So musically, it's still a hard-rocking tune, orchestrated in parts, but still a pretty rockin' song. So yeah, I do like Strange Reality. Then we go into A Little Too Far. We have our first ballad here on the album. While Tonight He Grins Again was a bit slower, there were some heavy parts to it. This one is strictly a ballad, with DT realizing his mistakes in the past. The lyrics here see DT reflecting about years to burn, years to trash, living lies based on flash, possibly referring to the media and fame. DT comes to the conclusion that he probably went a little too far during the peak of his career. With drugs, missing shows, the arguments in the band, he's realized he's burned bridges to the point where, to quote the song, John Wayne has caught the last train out, Spock and Kirk have had enough, and no one's left to beam me up. Very corny pop culture references right there, but I think it's another way of DT saying that even the most loyal people have given up on him. And I guess those people are examples of people who would be loyal, though he wants to get back and start it all over again. Musically, the song only features John Oliva singing and a piano, which seems about right. If this were a play, you could see DT maybe singing this in whatever place he's living in, all alone, and just singing the song. It's a nice ballad. Then we go into You're Alive, an energetic rocker that sees DT back on the stage. By this point, DT is performing again and selling out shows, despite mentions in the press saying that it'll never last. But they are wrong, as the crowds come in to see DT perform again. He's living his dream, but also mentions the risk of his comeback, with the lyrics of, when you're skating on ice, too thin to take it, got to move fast or else you'll break it. Throw back your hair and let the wind rush by, and you're alive. At a little less than 2 minutes, this is the shortest song on the album, but I think it's a good song overall. And then that leads us into Sammy and Tex. Things take a turn in the story here, as DT is confronted during rehearsals by a person from his past, a drug dealer named Sammy. Sammy has come to collect DT's overdue payments. DT is clean and sober now, but Sammy is unaware of this. He doesn't even believe DT when Sammy is told that he'll get his money. As Sammy threatens DT, DT's road manager, Tex, comes to the rescue, pinning Sammy against the wall. However, Sammy unleashes a knife and stabs Tex to death, fleeing the scene. DT is left there, with his friend lying dead on the ground, all because of DT's past. This is a very frantic song musically, with some chugging riffs coming from Chris Oliva, which really suit the song because this is a very intense part of the story. Yeah, it's a frightening and tragic part of the story too. So yeah, while it's a bit short, I do like Sammy and Tex. And then we end Act 1 with St. Patrick's. With Tex dead, DT leaves the club and goes to St. Patrick's Cathedral, where the side door is open later than it should be. DT walks into the church and begins to pray, asking God why he would let evil and pain exist. His road manager and friend was killed in cold blood, just because of DT's past and his comeback. However, DT becomes a bit flustered here, as he doesn't get an answer from above, which are expressed in the following lyrics here. Why all the things we asked or prayed would come to pass have gone unheard, like silent words that just slip into the past. There's also this verse. You say we must pay our dues, but still I am confused. I need to walk and with you talk instead of two statues. For Lord, they're not schemes. Can't you tell the dreams? With no answers, DT leaves the church and goes back on the streets to look for more answers. This is a very operatic track, given the subject matter and the emotions that DT is dealing with. His friend just died, and yeah, it does have that heaviness emotionally. And I like how the song does increase in dramatic intensity. It goes from being a very slow, quiet song, then the music heavies up and just increases in dramatic intensity before it climaxes to a quieter sound. And yeah, very powerful song. And that is Act 1 of Streets by Savatage. Once again, those songs from the first act are Streets, Jesus Saves, Tonight He Grins Again, Strange Reality, A Little Too Far, You're Alive, Sammy and Tex, and St. Patrick's. If you'd like to hear Act 1 of the album right now, you can pause the podcast right here and do so. Once you're finished, you can return to the show and hear about Act 2. If you want to continue listening to the show, then stick right here. But before we get to the next part, here's those songs from Act 1.
Somewhere out there, alone and out of place, streets of illusion soothe the shattered faith. I've been a runner, I've been a sinner, I've been inside my head. I've sit here staring, never quite caring, and this is where it has led. These streets glitter in the dark. Don't sleep when I'm sunken stars. Dream deep in the arms where you are safe. These streets still they never heard. Jesus was a talker, just out of place in New York. He hung out on the boulevard. He was selling nickel candies. He was saving up all his quarters. He bought himself a cheap guitar. Started playing bars. Kids came in their cars. Hear them shouting at the stage. Jesus says. Jesus says. Yes, it does. Jesus says. Once again I played the clown, used my friends and let them down. Walked the streets just staring out. Late at night the strange come out. Time again. I'm just looking for a friend, but no one seems to be around. Just this monkey that I found still is my only friend. And tonight he grins again. Tonight he grins again. Tonight he grins again. Who's this before me? Dressed in rags, soaked in gin. It's a sign or a warning. Am I now where he's been? Am I losing my way? Strange insanity. Is an illusion away? Is this reality? That could be me. That could be me. Back, gotta get back, gotta get back. When everything you touch turns gold, can weigh you down, can make you old. When metal doesn't ring the same, reaction from inside your brain. And all the years we offered up to gods who couldn't get enough, though we still stay up all night, the mornings aren't quite as bright. People take care when you're chasing a dream in the night, that the walls of the past don't interrupt your flight. Never stop, never turn, never look, never learn, so they say. Somewhere in time we must pay for yesterdays. You're skating on ice and didn't take it. You gotta move fast or else you'll break it. Throw back your hair, let the wind brush by, and you're alive. Yeah, you're alive. Hey, DJ, what you been up to? It's been a real long time and you're bills past due. Stop right there, don't you look away. You had your fun, now it's time to pay up. Well, you know that I've been waiting and I'm really very patient, but you pushed me way too far. She owe me 30,000 and with interest it's growing while you've hidden in these bars. Now I would have said duck it, but the money by the bucket, I hear you're raking in. So please forgive my diction and prepare for crucifixion while I write your next of kin. So please don't turn away. You borrowed, now you got to pay. Our lives got a bit off track, time to readjust, cause Sam is back. You take all the fame. Who'll accept the blame for all the hurt down here on earth? Unnecessary pain. Surely you must care. Or are you only air built in our minds? We're in binds, never really there.
You're listening to Albums Uncovered, and you just heard about Act 1 of Streets by Savatage. Once again, those songs from Act 1 were Streets, Jesus Saves, Tonight He Grins Again, Strange Reality, A Little Too Far, You're Alive, Sammy and Tex, and St. Patrick's. Now we go into Act 2 of the album, and we start with a song called Can You Hear Me Now? Act 2 opens with a song that sees DT on the streets. At first glance, the song seems to be like a retread of St. Patrick's. It kind of is in that DT is looking for answers, but then again it isn't. DT seems to be calling out for help from people in the streets. Probably not literally, so he's probably walking around the city, seeing all the people without anyone saying a word to him. By the chorus, DT wonders if anyone can hear him, or are there, to quote the song, just too many doors. People in the town would recognize DT given that he's popular, but are they just used to seeing him? It's possible. If anything, I think DT is feeling lonely and is in need of answers. It's a dark and heavy tune with great guitar riffs coming from Chris Oliva. So I think it's a good song to open up this part of the album where we're going to see DT talking to all these different kinds of people living on the streets. So as such, I think it's a good song. Then we go into New York City Don't Mean Nothing. In the story featured in the liner notes, DT proceeds to talk to different people on the streets. These people include a homeless man, a pimp, a drug addict, and a prostitute. These next few songs see DT seeking for answers. What kind of answers? Given the death of Tex, DT seems to be asking the same question that he asked God in the first act. Why do pain and evil exist? But let's be honest, I don't think he's asking everybody that. So if that's not the question, I think it could be something simple as, what do the streets mean to you? So this song here seems to be coming from the homeless man, who's been in New York City since 1981, so he's seen it all. The man thinks that New York City doesn't mean anything, and that it's, quote, just a good place when you're running. The song starts off as a slow acoustic tune before the bass and drums kick in, then it becomes another hard rocker about the dangers of the streets. In the song, the man warns DT to never sleep alone on the subway, don't believe in people on TV, know who your friends are, and be careful of burning bridges. It's possible that this song could be coming from DT, because everything that's mentioned in the song is something that DT has done. However, I'm trying to stick with the story that's in the booklet, so I think if anything, I think the case is that the homeless man here doesn't recognize who DT is and tells DT what he already knows. Also, bit of a spoiler here, the booklet does say that none of the people on the streets really help him. So with the homeless man telling him all these things that he shouldn't do, well, that's no help. DT's already done all of them. I think it's a good tune. Then we go into Ghost in the Ruins, one of my favorites from the album. In this song, DT seems to be talking to a pimp. Now the story says that DT also talks to a prostitute. So I think it's safe to put the two together, although I don't think he does too much talking with the prostitute. Let's go into the song here. In the song, the pimp shares his thoughts on New York City. For him, he doesn't have to worry about anything. He's got a limousine and tons of money. He's the king of the ruins. He's doing well, and he has dreams to sell. He's behind the scenes, and no one knows it, thus making him a ghost in the ruins. By the second verse, he points at a runaway on the corner, which I'll read from right now. Just a throwaway, but somebody's daughter. Had a pretty face, so somebody bought her. Selling her soul away, so put in your order. Sounds like it's referring to a prostitute. Although none of the lyrics here sound like they're coming from her. Perhaps she has nothing to say. Or maybe we are to believe that DT does buy a prostitute from the pimp. Usually if you're looking for someone to talk to, going to a prostitute isn't going to help you. And again, none of the people that DT talks to are of any help. So it goes along with that theme, that these people are unhelpful. Musically, it's a pretty catchy song, while also very sinister, because listening to the lyrics, it just really hits it spot on of how a pimp talks about how life's been good to them. They don't need to worry. They've got the city in the palm of their hands. And I love it for that. I think it's a really good song. One of my favorites for sure. Then we go into If I Go Away. At this point, DT decides to phone up an ex-girlfriend. According to the story, she hangs up on him. Feeling lonely once more, DT begins to wonder what life would be like if he had never existed. His friends probably would still be alive, and Tex wouldn't have died at the hands of Sammy. There's lyrics here that give hints to DT's journey in that he's looking for answers. Somewhere on that long empty road, we all stand lone, searching for clues from our different views. With this feeling of emptiness, DT wonders what would remain of him if he were to go away. Not only not exist, but in the afterlife after he's dead. There's also mentions of staring down an empty hall, pictures on the wall. Could DT be back at his home, or the remains of the place that he lived in with his girlfriend? It's possible. Lyrically, it's a deep song that serves as one of the ballads from the album, and I think it's a strong tune. Then we go into Agony and Ecstasy. DT now comes to what in the story is described as a drug addict, and he probably is, but I think it's more of a drug dealer. So I'm going to say that for this song, he's talking to a drug dealer. Lyrically, we know for a fact that this is someone talking to DT, given that DT's name is in the lyrics. Already, the drug dealer lays out his beliefs with these lines. I'm the madness that just will not die, with no regrets of what I'll do to you. Before the night is over, you'll be crawling to me. So the dealer's philosophy and mindset is he only cares about himself. He says he'll keep his clients happy, promising if they stay with him, he'll set them free, basically by supplying them with drugs. As with any person that gets addicted to drugs, they'll be asking for more, which means the dealer will keep getting money, hence the song's title, Agony and Ecstasy. There's agony from his clients, and with ecstasy, there's a double meaning there, because ecstasy is a drug, and it's also a feeling, and that's how the drug dealer's feeling. He's getting joy from their pain, and it seems that the dealer here wants to hook DT up, perhaps suggesting if DT turns to drugs, he'll forget all of his problems. Just like everybody else that DT's talked to, this is not of any help. Musically, this is a pretty steady hard rocker. No frills, no orchestrations or anything. It's just an all-out rocker, and I think it's a great song. Then we go into Heal My Soul. DT is once again asking for the Lord's help. After asking for advice from so many people, it seems that DT has reached the end. There is no answer to his problems. DT wonders if he's drifted and gone forever. He seems to have given up on life. Not suicidal, but he does say in the song, shall I waken in thy home? He's asking to be with God, basically. And it's a very serious song, all piano-based, kind of like A Little Too Far. And yeah, it is a very touching song. Then we go into Somewhere in Time. Following his words with God, DT realizes that it just might be time to start his life over again. He concludes that God has given him the answers all these years. If DT can't find the answers to this tragedy now, he believes that he'll find the answers somewhere in time. Whether it be now or years from now, DT has decided he's going to continue with the rest of his life. Now this would have been a very nice closing track, but we have one more song to go, and we end the second act as well as the album with Believe. At this point, DT has decided to live the rest of his life. Just then, he walks up the streets a little more and notices a swarm of people gathered around the sidewalk. DT sees a homeless man with white hair, a beard, and blackened skin from lack of hygiene. Even though the man is dying, no one wants to be near him, not even the police. So DT decides to go to the dying man and offers him his hand. The old man accepts it, looks at DT in the eyes, smiles, and then passes away peacefully. From the man's body, a ghostly young boy with blonde hair and blue eyes appears. DT is the only one to notice this, and the child leads DT to a roof overlooking the city at night. DT then realizes that the ghost child is the spirit of the old man. Although the spirit is in the form of when the man was a child, it is here overlooking the city and the stars. The child sings to him this song. Believe is a beautiful song that fittingly ends this album. With the song coming from the ghost child, he concludes DT's story, telling him that after all these one-night stands, you've ended up with your heart in hand. The child acknowledges that DT is feeling regretful of his flaws and is asking for forgiveness. He acknowledges that he's the way, he is the light, and that he's been with DT this entire time. He also tells DT that he'll always be with him, and all he asks for DT to do is to believe. DT is a flawed person. He was active in crime, let his bandmates down, Tex died because of DT's past. Even then, DT isn't that bad of a person. After all, he put his needs aside and decided to be with the old man during his final moments, something that DT wasn't able to do with Tex. After the child sings the song, he vanishes into the night, while DT makes his way back home. Overall, I think the meaning behind Streets is that no one is born a failure. It's kind of like It's a Wonderful Life in a way, which is funny to think about considering that Savatage are the band that led to Trans-Siberian Orchestra. But I think it's a message that can resonate with any listener. When you're at the lowest of lows, just believe that things will get better. Now, is it corny? Of course. Is it a great way to end the album? Absolutely. And that is Act 2 of Streets by Savatage. Once again, those songs from the second act are Can You Hear Me Now? New York City Don't Mean Nothing, Ghost in the Ruins, If I Go Away, Agony and Ecstasy, Heal My Soul, Somewhere in Time, and Believe. If you'd like to hear Act 2 of the album right now, you can pause the podcast right here and do so. Once you're finished, you can return to the show and hear the conclusion. If you want to continue listening to the show, then stick right here. But before we get to the next part, here's those songs from Act 2.
Somewhere in the haze, passage through the maze. Can you hear me now? Are there just too many doors between then and now? Me to ever reach on through, pull you back somehow. That don't happen anymore. Still in the night, I think I hear you calling. Never burn the bridges before you, never burn the bridges behind. Don't burn the one that you're walking on, you're gonna hit the water in time. Don't believe in expectations, don't believe in shooting stars. If you make a stand on a dead empty head, never let them see your cause. Cause if you're running blind on a refueled mind, but watch the time, careful you don't go too far, too far. She knows she's doing, she's a ghost in the ruins. She's doing it well tonight. She got dreams to sell tonight. She wants to be loved. She knows what to do. She's got to hang on. I'm running the streets, lightning like gasoline. I'm taking you empty. East side, west side, playing for keeps. Playing for keeps. Yeah, yeah. In the dark I've called out your name. It echoes in vain over again. In an empty room. If I go away, what would still remain? never sleeps. Tell me what's your price. Come skate on my ice. The blades, they never rust. I'm asking you to trust. Listen now, the time is right. What a way to stop the night. Spend your money endlessly, another grand insanity. So they this is the plan. I'll make your brain a rubber band. Time to stretch it out and breathe. Agony and that's absurd. I cannot hold, and Father, hear me. I'm tired. Shall I waken in thy home and hold me closer? I am trying. Sweet Lord Jesus, heal my soul. I've been grasping at rainbows, hanging on till the end. The rain is so real, Lord, and the rainbows pretend. The rainbows pretend. I've been changing, redefining all the things I thought I knew so long ago. I was flying through the years, seemed so far away. I am the way, I am the light, I am the dark inside the night. I hear your hopes, I feel your dreams, and in the dark I hear your screams. Don't turn away, just take my hand. When you make your final stand, be right there, I'll never leave. All I ask of you is believe.
You're listening to Albums Uncovered, and you just heard about Act 2 of Streets by Savatage. Once again, those songs from the second act were Can You Hear Me Now?, New York City Don't Mean Nothing, Ghost in the Ruins, If I Go Away, Agony and Ecstasy, Heal My Soul, Somewhere in Time, and Believe. Streets was released on October 4th, 1991. When released, the album did receive acclaim from some rock and metal magazines. However, sales-wise, the album didn't do as well as the band had hoped it would. Another thing to keep in mind is that Streets was released just weeks after Nirvana's 1991 critically acclaimed album, Nevermind, a cornerstone of the grunge rock genre. So times were changing, and no one really had time for a new Savatage album, or any metal album for that matter. And it's also worth mentioning that when Savatage did release Hall of the Mountain King and Gutter Ballet, they were successful albums, but they weren't to the point where they were like top sellers or like best sellers, but they were successful nevertheless. But with Streets, like the interest was kind of dwindling. Even then, people did recognize that it was a good album. Either way, the band went on tour and supported the album. However, by the end of the tour, singer John Oliva was having some issues with his singing voice. Taken from an interview in 2021 with 80s glam metal cast, John Oliva remembers this time.
On the Streets tour, you know, we were doing like six shows a week, and we were doing 2 hours plus a night. And let me tell you, you know, I don't know about what others say, but singing Savatage music isn't fucking easy. Okay? It's not easy. And I just I was the last show of the Streets tour, I was spitting blood off the side of the stage. Okay, that's how bad it was. And I went to a doctor after I made it through that last show. I think it was in North Carolina or something. And I went to my doctor, and my doctor said, look, man, okay, you have nodes, whatever those things are called, nodes, and all this shit. It's like, you need to take some time off.
John's voice had been overworked from years of singing the Savatage music. With that, he had to bow out from the band as their singer. Dozens of singers were auditioned, and in the end, singer Zachary Stevens was chosen as the new Savatage singer. And despite John not being the singer anymore, I still think that he never left Savatage. While he wasn't on stage with them all the time, he has appeared on every album, at least playing keyboards. So while John would not appear in some group shots all the time, I still stick by this. The band's first album with Zachary Stevens was 1993's Edge of Thorns. The album, at that point, was the closest thing that the band had to a commercial hit, with the title track reaching the top 40. Things were looking good for Savatage until October 17th, 1993. On that night, guitarist Chris Oliva was killed in a car accident by a drunk driver. The crash occurred at 3:30 a.m., and Chris was with his wife, Dawn, while they were on their way to the 4th Annual Livestock Festival in Florida. Dawn Oliva survived the crash, but Chris was killed instantly. On top of that, the driver in question had 7 prior DUI convictions. He survived the crash and was found guilty of DUI manslaughter, amongst other charges, and ended up serving 18 months of a 5-year sentence. Despite Chris Oliva's death, Savatage continued in 1994 with another album, an album entitled Handful of Rain. Now, with Handful of Rain, there's only 3 guys on the album: John Oliva, Zachary Stevens, and Testament guitarist Alex Sokolnik. John Oliva has said that the other guys in Savatage weren't feeling up to going in the studio. It was just too soon after Chris had died. With John, he just felt like he was going to go crazy if he didn't go in the studio. So he made an album with these 2 other guys, and that became Handful of Rain. But in the music videos and on the album itself, the other guys were credited. In 1995, a new 6-man Savatage got together for the album Dead Winter Dead. The new lineup consisted of singer Zachary Stevens, guitarist Chris Caffery, who was last in the band as the second guitarist during the Gutter Ballet tour, guitarist Al Petrelli, bassist Johnny Lee Middleton, drummer Jeff Plate, and on keyboards and sometimes vocals, John Oliva. Similar to Streets, Dead Winter Dead was another concept album, this time dealing with a love story between a Serb boy and a Muslim girl who fall in love during the Bosnian War. The album was well received, and one of the album's tracks became a radio hit. I'll just play a little bit of it right now. That song was Christmas Eve, Sarajevo. It was a bona fide hit. With the success of the song, producer Paul O'Neill and John Oliva thought about making another band that were more focused on the crossover between heavy metal and classical music. That band would become Trans-Siberian Orchestra, and they would go on to achieve more success than Savatage. Even then, Savatage would release another 2 albums, The Wake of Magellan in 1997 and Poets and Madmen in 2001. There were some lineup changes here and there, but mostly it was the same set of guys. After Poets and Madmen, that was it. Savatage just stopped all activity, and more focus was put on Trans-Siberian Orchestra. According to John Oliva in later years, there were conflicts with the label in releasing more music under the Savatage name. Then at the same time, there were those fans who were itching to hear those Savatage songs. To keep Savatage fans happy, John Oliva formed his own band, John Oliva's Pain, who would perform the Savatage songs along with original material. Finally, in the summer of 2015, Savatage reunited at the Wacken Open Air Festival in Germany, playing a 40-minute set before merging their stage with Trans-Siberian Orchestra. And yeah, that was a pretty big show then, to have those songs performed for the first time by those guys in almost 20 years. Incredible. Sadly, on April 5th, 2017, Paul O'Neill died after an accidental overdose. Despite O'Neill's death, Trans-Siberian Orchestra continued. As of 2021, Savatage had not released any new music since 2001, and that album in 2001 was Poets and Madmen. However, earlier this year in 2021, John Oliva has revealed that he and the guys have been writing some new material, to the point where he's claiming they have 3 albums worth of new material. When this is going to come out is unknown. They really need a record label, according to John. So we'll just have to see what happens. As for Streets, it's still seen as a great album. In 2005, it was ranked at number 310 in Rock Hard magazine's book of the 500 greatest rock and metal albums of all time. And in general, it's still seen as one of Savage's best albums. And John Oliva has said many times that of all the albums Sabotage have made, Streets remains his favorite.
And that record is a testimony that it's the best work that we did, that we were at our peak there. That was our peak record. That was our Sgt. Pepper. That was our, that was our fucking physical graffiti. You know what I mean? It was definitely the high point of that band. With Chris Oliva as a part of the band, that was the best work we ever did. And it's still to this day my favorite Sabotage record.
30 years later, Streets is still a classic album. You've been listening to Albums Uncovered. I'm Aaron Kahn. Stay tuned for more Albums Uncovered. Be sure to follow the show on Twitter and Facebook. You can also follow me at Aaron_Kahn on Twitter. If you'd like to stay up to date with the podcast, please consider subscribing. Thank you for listening.